Good evening, good evening. Good evening, gentlemen, good evening, hello. We are continuing our study. From last week, we began a discourse, Naaseh. That is the name of our discourse that we are learning from the Chassidic Rebbes, the previous Rebbe of Lubavitch, a mimer that he said in 1931 in Lithuania. This mimer discusses 4 steps, we should say, that we go through in order to build a dwelling place for the man of God being the pure spirit constantly coming in our direction to allow for the breaking of our natural emotions. That's what we discussed last week. What is an Ish Elokim Kadosh? Literally, a holy man of God. It is a spirit of purity that is available to every Jew, that's constantly shining upon every Jew, and it has the power to break our natural emotions, to transform what we love and what we fear, what we want to move towards and what we want to move away. The only problem is that this holy man of God comes, shines on us, and he bounces off, right? We don't grasp him. We don't capture him.
Like a reflector.
We don't, exactly, like a reflector. We don't bring him into our lives, into our inner reality. He remains something, good evening, he remains something abstract, removed from our reality. The solution is the name of our discourse, the name of our mimer. Naaseh na alias kir ketana. We are going to make for him a walled-off space, a little attic. We're going to make a little space for this spirit of purity to dwell within us. And in order to make that space, the verse lists 4 steps. It has 4 components. The 4 components are mitah, shulchan, kisei, and menorah. Bed, table, seat, and lamp. And we explained that these 4 components are really the evening prayer, Ma'ariv, and the morning prayer, Shacharis. The mitah, the bed, refers to the evening prayer for somewhat obvious reasons. The other 3 are all parts of Shacharis, all parts of the morning prayer. The Shulchan, the table, is Psukei de Zimra and Birchas Kriyas Shema, so it's everything from Baruch She'amar until the Shema. You have the Kisei, which is the chair, that is the saying of the Shema in Shacharis, the Shema Yisrael. And the Menorah, the lamp, is the Shemona Esrei, the silent Amidah. These are the 4 steps to building this dwelling place for the light of Hashem. To which the Chassidic Rebbes asked a very straightforward question, which is, we know which of the 3 daily prayers is the most important, the most valued. And the answer is Mincha, the afternoon prayer. And yet the afternoon prayer is not listed among any of the 4 steps to building this home, this inner dwelling place for the spirit of purity. Mincha is not mentioned. Why? So the Chassidic Rebbes answers immediately, Ha-gufa, hi-anaisenas. The reason it's not mentioned is because it's the highest one. In other words, all of these 4 steps are only preparations for Mincha. Mincha is really, when you go through these 4 steps, you are then able to daven Mincha. And that is how we bring this Holy Spirit into within us, to bring it into our lives. And we ended last week's class with the question on the second line of the second page here, the second side of our first of the first sheet of paper. It says the Hebrew letters Kuf Samech Hey at the top. It's page 165. In, by the way, the Chassidic Rebbes Sefer Mamarim Kuntresim Aleph. If anyone wants to know what physical volume it's in, there's actually usually one around here somewhere. You actually have one. The shul has one. There it is. Here. This is the volume, by the way, I didn't show you last week. This is the volume that this discourse comes from. And the set of the discourse of the Chassidic Rebbes, Kuntresim means pamphlets, because this book has within it, it's literally a series of pamphlets. The Chassidic Rebbes originally published these as little soft cover handouts that the Chassidim would learn. And then eventually, when they had many of them, they bound them all into one book, which is this book. So, the Chassidic Rebbe asks, on the third line of the second page, the following question that we ended with last week, or started the second line. He says, "V'tzarich lahavin," we have to understand, mahu inyan tfilas hamincha bichlal. What is the idea of the afternoon prayer in general? And what idea does it represent in the service of man, in the Aveda, the worship of God in a man's life in general? What is mincha? Now, in order to answer this question, we are going to go through this whole Seder. So the rest of the Maimer, essentially, is going through how we internalize this spirit of purity that each and every Jew has access to. In other words, how do we not merely know about God as a concept? How do we not merely have a connection to God through faith, which is very superficial and doesn't change us, as we discussed last week? How do we take something which is superficial and doesn't change us and make it into something that actually turns over our emotions, that turns over our traits, that allows us to love God as much as we love worldly things? And there are 4 steps, and we're going to go through all 4 of the steps. But first, at the end, for the rest of this paragraph, you see there's a paragraph break in the middle of our page. For the rest of this paragraph, the Chassidic Rebbe is going to have a brief introductory idea. L'chaim. So without further ado, third line of the second page. Rather, the idea is Dehine ksiv vayehi erev vayehi veiker yom echad. It was evening and it was morning one day. Right? Normally translated as the first day, but very famously it doesn't say the first, it says one. It was evening and it was morning one day, from the story of Genesis, the creation of the universe. What does this phrase mean in Chassidus? What is the deeper spiritual significance of this phrase? It was evening and it was morning one day. The Chassidic Rebbe reads it as follows. The tachlis aveidahu sheyiyah b'chinas echad. The main purpose of man's worship of God. Why are we here? That there should be echad. Echad has 2 meanings in the Chassidic Rebbe's usage. Echad means one. Echad is also Aleph, Ches, Dalet. It has 3 letters which numerically are 1, 8, and 4. Echad. Echad means one, but the letters are Aleph, Ches, and Dalet, which are 1, 8, and 4. What is the significance of these numbers? That in the 4 directions, the 4 cardinal directions, the 7 heavens and the earth, so that's 4 and 8, right? You have the 4 directions. You have the 7 heavens and the earth, meaning all different qualitative levels of holiness, as well as everywhere on earth, in all the directions. Into this multiplicity, yamshichu b'chinas ha'echad she'hu ein sof. We draw into it the one, which is the infinite one, the alufa shel olam, the aleph, the letter aleph, and alufa shel olam, which means the supreme being of the world, have the same root, aleph and alufa, the one and the supreme. So altogether, the word echad, the word one, means Aleph Ches Daled, that the one supreme God over the world should be drawn into the earth and the 7 heavens and all 4 directions. So altogether, man's purpose on earth, man's Aveda, our worship of God, the purpose of it is to make a connection. You have a world of multiplicity. You have a world that is 4 and 8. Into that you draw oneness. You draw unity, God who is one. And we should note, although this is a topic that's very, has a lot of depth, perhaps too much to properly go into right now, but I just want to note that in Chassidus, there is no unity, there is no true oneness outside of God. In other words, when we say bringing the one into multiplicity, a one into a place of many, the only one that can really be brought into a place of many and truly remain one is God. And Chassidus discusses this at great length. The appearance of unity in the world, in worldly things and in ungodly things even, is merely a consequence of godliness. In other words, everything that is unified has an aspect of the godly within it. The Rebbeim discuss this in the context of, who wants to guess which story from the Torah? The Rebbeim discuss this in this idea in context of, that unity is always godly. They discuss it in context of the story of the Tower of Babel, is usually what they discuss it in context of. Yeah. Because at the story of the Migdal Bavel, everybody came together to do something that was negative and that was bad. And it's the first time in the Torah that that happens. Therefore, where does Chassidus ask all the questions about how can evil have a unity, how can evil cohere into one? It asks it in that context. And there's very complex and deep answers to that question. But I think for us, the question, we should remember that it's a question. In other words, the Rebbeim believe that it requires an explanation if something that is non-godly can come together and cooperate. The very idea of even cooperation in Chassidus is a godly notion. Godliness, God is the true unity, the true oneness. Continues the Chassidic Rebbes, I'm 3 lines up from the bottom of the paragraph. V'zeu yom echad hagilui de'echad. That is what it means, yom echad, one day. What's a day? A day is light, right? When you say day, we mean daylight. So one day means the revelation, the shining of echad, of godliness, right? So it was evening and it was morning, and godliness shone is really how we're translating the pasuk now according to Chassidus, because Yom Echad means this whole unity, this coming together of one into multiplicity is revealed. That's what Yom Echad means. Echad means one into the many. Yom means light, revelation. Yom Echad, the revelation of one coming into many. So the Chassidic Rebbe, I just want to make a note on the previous Rebbe's style. As we can see here, he is literally just going through verses and explaining the Chassidic meaning in the words, right? If you don't realize what he's doing, it can be confusing. The whole thing that's structuring this is the verse. He tells you the verse, then he goes word by word and is literally giving the Chassidic meaning of the words. And then the whole verse together has a Chassidic meaning. Mm-hmm. So, we've done one day. What about evening and morning? The bichdei sheyiyeh hagili de'echad hu al yedei erev vaveiker. And how do we get this revelation of the one, the expression of true unity of God? It is through erev vaveiker. It is through evening and morning. The bichdei sheyiyeh beiker hu al yedei hakdamas ha'aveda de'erev. In order that there can be morning, it is through the preceding worship of God in the evening. The haschalas ha'aveda he me'erev she tfilas arvis bichlal, that the beginning of all worship of God is in the evening, which is the prayer, the evening prayer in general, the kriya shma she'alamita bifrat, and the shema that we read upon our beds, the last thing that we say, the last prayer we say before we go to sleep, specifically. So the verse, according to the Chassidic Rebbe, is Vayihi erev vayivoker yom echad. Simple translation, it was evening and it was morning, one day. Chassidic Rebbe's translation, in order to draw the unified one into the place of multiplicity, in order to draw God fully into the world, it is through the worship of God which begins in the evening and continues into the morning. The way we draw this divine unity into the world is through davening, specifically the evening davening and the morning davening. And I just want to point out that it is very interesting, if you think about it, that the Chassidic Rebbe is taking a verse which is about the creation of the world, and it was evening and it was morning one day, and he is reading it as a verse teaching us how to bring God into the world. In other words, just as there is the simple meaning of the verse and the Chassidic reading of the verse, so too there is a superficial reality of the world, which says there is a passage of time, evening and morning, and this is just the way things happen to work because of certain physical natures and physical eventualities, circumstances, right? That there's evening and morning. And there's beyond that superficial reality, there is the true reality, which is that why do evening and morning exist? Not for their own sake, but so that there can be an evening prayer and a morning prayer. So that we can bring God into multiplicity. We can bring God into two different states, into a duality, right? The very fact that we have davening, evening and morning, allows us to bring God into a place of multiplicity, if you think about it. So the previous Rebbe is reading into a verse which is about, on the surface, simply about creation of the world. At the deeper level, he's reading into it that why is the world created? Why does this multiplicity exist? For us to bring unity into it. That is the whole purpose of the evening and the morning.
So there's almost a mild contradiction, because on the one hand, you have the literal meaning of the words, and then you have the metaphorical understanding, and that gives rise to many questions that people who are less religious have.
Sure it does.
Because they say, well,
sure it does. But listen, the first point to make is that this is not an innovation. The Torah has always been learned this way. The innovation was to say that there is a simple translation and that's the real thing, and then all other interpretations and all other meanings are added on top of it. That was the innovation. And from that innovation, the problems began. In other words, the whole idea that the Torah can even be read literally in the sense that some people think it can be read, like, for example, Protestant, across the street, the people across the street, certain Christians.
Even Jews, right? The Karaim, they read it without...
Yeah, I don't know, because that's a little bit, I think, maybe a little bit more complicated. The whole idea that the Torah can just be read in a straightforward way, literally in any way, was never originally a Jewish concept. In other words, when we say the literal meaning, right, there is no word in let's say in rabbinic understanding of Torah for literal translation. The word that's used is pshat. Pshat does not mean literal. Pshat means simple, and ish pashat is a simple man. Pshat means the simple, straightforward meaning, not the literal one. Which is why, the easiest proof for this is that the most famous simple interpreter, or straightforward interpreter of the Torah is Rashi. And Rashi diverts from the literal meaning of the Torah everywhere, starting from the first verse, in fact. In other words, Rashi's commentary does not just say, the translation is such and such, right? That would be the easy way out if there was a literal translation of the Torah. Just say what the words mean, Rashi. Rashi doesn't do that. Rashi, in the simple understanding of the Torah, has all kinds of explanations which are not necessarily so literal, not necessarily so the direct translations of the words. So even in the so-called literal understanding of Torah, in the Jewish sense, that understanding has always taken into account contradictions, textual comparison, different levels of meaning, connotations of the text, right? And has never been a simple translation. And in fact, even if you read the actual translation of the Torah, because if you take any chumash, right? If you take any regular chumash, right, it has on the side something called unkelus, Targum unkelus, who translated the Torah into Aramaic, right? That translation is also a commentary. That itself is also not a literal. There's many places where Unkelus departs from the quote-unquote literal understanding of the verse. So in other words, this whole idea of the Torah's literal understanding, and that being the real one, you know what it's like? The Chassidim tell a famous story, right? What's it like to read the Torah with only the stubborn literalist interpretation? So there's a famous story that the Chassidim told, which was actually about it was making fun of people that didn't understand Chassidus, but it really applies to all levels of Torah abstraction. How does the story go? So there was a very small child in a town, I believe, called Dvinsk in Eastern Europe. Now, in Dvinsk, I believe so, in Latvia, in Dvinsk, there were at one time two famous Rabbanim. One was a non-Chassidic Rav, one was a Chassidic Rav. The non-Chassidic Rav was named the Or Sameach, you've probably heard of him, very, very famous. And the other was named the Rogachover Gaon, who's also very, very famous. Two great Torah luminaries in one town, right? Fantastic. One to the Chassidim and one to the non-Chassidim, to the Chassidically challenged. But okay, there were two great Torah luminaries in this town. And there was a small child who walks into the shul one morning after Shacharis. Everyone had had their herring and vodka after Shacharis already, as everyone in Eastern Europe did, presumably. And the small child hears them arguing. What are they arguing about? The people in the synagogue, a fight has broken out, a verbal fight, an argument has broken out, over who is the bigger Gadol, who's the bigger Talmid Chacham, right? Who's Gresser, as you would say in Yiddish, who's bigger? So one says, the Or Sameach, how could you even compare? How could you compare anyone to the Or Sameach? And the other side says, what are you talking about? The Rogachover Gaon, his genius in Torah is unparalleled. And they're arguing, who's bigger? And the small child yanks on someone's talis, right? And he says, I don't understand. Everyone in town knows. You see them when they walk to shul. You see the Rabbanim. The Rogachover Gaon is very short. And the Or Sameach is very tall. The Or Sameach is clearly bigger. He doesn't understand what's everyone arguing about. The Or Sameach is the bigger Rav, right? So they sit him down. They say, "Young child, we're not discussing who's bigger physically. That nothing could matter to us less. We're discussing their greatness in Torah, things that are totally non-physical, things that are totally spiritual." And the child tells them, "Ach, pshetlach," which means no, not simpletons. It means like cute answers. Like you're trying to give cute answers to the question. You're departing from the literal meaning of the question. Like you think you're impressing me with your highfalutin explanations about spiritual greatness. I know what's real. The Or Sameach is taller. That's the story. The Hamevin Yavin. And, those who understand the story understand the story. L'chaim.
But the Torah is actually asking for that kind of question to be asked. Because, obviously when you read it, you understand that it's different. Because it should have been written in a different way. There's nothing by Yom Echad. It's like Ha-Echad. Like the letter was missing.
The first day, Yom Rishon, something different.
So, the way the Torah is written is actually for us to see, the reason to ask questions, because it's not clear.
All right, with that digression, I think we gave a lot of time to that. Let's go on to the second paragraph. Now, we are going to begin to discuss what it means by the bed, the evening prayer, which is interesting, by the way. If you take nothing else from this mimer, take the following idea. A Jew's worship of God begins in the evening. If you come to Shacharis in the morning, if you come to morning prayers and find yourself totally uninspired, totally empty, you can't daven Shacharis, what should you have done? You should have focused more in the evening. The Avodah begins in the evening. Don't wake up first thing in the morning and show up, as my Rosh Yeshiva always used to say, if you go to sleep like a dog, you can't wake up like a lion, right? You have to, the worship of a Jew begins in the evening. And as we are going...
it's strange, because when you do Shema L'Mitah, if the day didn't have Tachnun, you don't say the thing related.
Yeah, no, it's affected by the day, of course. It's affected by the day. And of course, you're coming out of a day, and most of Kriyat Shema, as we're going to see, is about the previous day. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, it is the beginning of the Avodah cycle. If you need to jumpstart your worship of God, if your Shacharis feels empty, you should start with the night before. That's the first thing.
Why is it the bedtime Shema and not the Mars Shema?
We will answer that shortly. Okay. That's the first thing. I just want to note as a very general point to take here, if you take nothing else that we're going to say. The second thing I want to say before we dive into this is that in case anyone was listening last week at the beginning of this week's class, and they think that the philosophical discourses we were learning before are difficult, and these discourses are easy, you may find out about halfway through this paragraph that it's much easier to go back to the philosophical discourses, because the Frierdiker Rebbe is very, very real. We're not going to be messing about, as you're about to see. We're going to talk about what Kriya Shema ala Mita, what saying Kriya Shema on your bed is supposed to be like, and we'll see. We'll see what it's supposed to be like.
It's supposed to be like you're on your grave.
Okay. Ubir davar zeh. I'm just going to read. I don't have much outside to say unless we need to explain something for this paragraph. So let's just read in the Frierdiker Rebbe's words. Let's get that warmth of the previous Rebbe. Ubir davar zeh, the explanation of the evening service, and specifically the Kriya Shema upon one's bed. The worship of saying Kriya Shema on your bed. The worship aspect. In other words, not necessarily just the words it says in the Siddur, but what are you meant to be accomplishing for God in this time, is that the person performs a cheshbein tzedek, which means a righteous reckoning. A righteous reckoning, a righteous calculation.
Which is very true, because if you don't say the Aleph right, then you go to the chamber.
That's not what he means, as we're going to see. What is the cheshbon tzedek? What is the righteous reckoning? Mikol masha avar alav b'meshach hayom. A reckoning of everything that happened to the person during the day. That is what the reckoning is of. You're supposed to sit at Kriya Shema Lamita and think about what happened to you during the day. Particularly, what your day should have gone like versus how it actually went. That's the righteous reckoning. That's what you're supposed to think about. How it went versus how it should have gone.
So you're not supposed to sleep at all.
The haroi, how should it have gone? Right? The Frierdiker Rebbe is going to describe how our day should have gone every day. The haroi hu asher teikef umiyad b'kumay mishinasei. What was appropriate, how his day should have gone, is that immediately upon rising from his sleep, yisasek ba'avedas habere yizbarech. He should have toiled in the worship of God, may he be blessed, of his Creator, may he be blessed. U'kamashakasav reishis arisay seichem chala tarimu truma v'geimer. Arisay seichem lashon arisa. As the verse says, the first of all your does. I think I actually put this in the source sheet at the end. Let me read it in the direct translation so as not to... I wouldn't want to argue with the translation. Yeah, last source on the source page I got. As the first yield of your baking, you shall set aside a loaf as a gift. You shall set it aside as a gift, like the gift from the fresh threshing floor. In other words, the Frierdiker Rebbe always said this. The Frierdiker Rebbe used to quote this verse when talking about how in schools that have a split Judaic and secular curriculum, the Judaic curriculum should be in the morning and the secular curriculum should be in the afternoon. Why? Because the first of your baking, right, the first of your efforts should be for God. That should be always the first thing, right? The teikef umiyad b'kumei mishinasei yitnan la'Hashem truma. That immediately upon waking from bed, you should give God truma. You should give God a donation. You should give God tzedakah, a gift, charity. Right? What does that mean? What does he mean by that? Ba'amiras mizmere tehillim, by saying chapters of Psalms, of Tehillim. Ubelimud kol echad lefi yechalte, and by learning Torah, each one according to his ability. Ules palel betzibur, and to pray in a minyan. Ules asek beinyane meschare, kefia Torah. And he's going through the day, right? This is how your day should have been. You should have gotten up immediately and immediately rushed to serve God. You should have said Tehillim and you should have learned Torah. You should have davened with a minyan. Ules asek beinyane meschare, kefia Torah. And then you should have gone and done work in earning a living according to the Torah. Bezehirus, with great care, me'evek eina, to avoid the me'avak eina, to avoid even the dust of deception in your work, right? There's a sin in Judaism called eina, which means cheating someone in business, right?
This is different. Ona'ah is a at the beginning.
Which is?
Ona'ah.
Yeah.
This is not the way you spell ona'ah. It's a different word. I don't know what this one is.
I don't know. As far as I know, this means the sin of cheating, deceiving someone in business.
It's with A at the beginning, not Aleph.
And you should avoid also even the dust of this Avera. The lasos, in other words, even a suspicion, an inkling of this sin. The lasos kemilas chasadim imrei eyu, and you should do kindness with your fellow, which means, in the simple meaning, it means, pardon me, it means to give tzedakah. It means to give charity. Gemilas chasadim, in the simple meaning, means you should give charity to your fellow. The kol zeh hu haroi liyos. All of this is what should be. That's how your day should have gone. That's how your day should have gone. That's the order of a Jew's day.
The explanation of this word is actually not cheating, is actually to hurt other people with making them sorrow and hurting them by wrong, almost like a lashon hara.
Okay, great. אבל בפועל היה אשר תקף ומיד בקומה משינasei עוסק בצרכי הבייס. But what actually happened? So that's how your day should have been. But what actually happened? Immediately when you got up from sleep, you started working with tzarchei abayis. You started working on the needs of the household, right? Household needs, grocery list, furniture. I notice I have to clean up in here, right? That's my first thing that I think about. And sometimes he also doesn't pray with a minyan. And his davening itself is with great speed. He davens very quickly, right? Too quickly. He doesn't hear the words that he's speaking, which, as we know in Jewish law, you have to hear the words that you speak when you pray. And his heart is empty within him. Because of his great, because of all his woes and his thoughts about his matters, about his personal matters. He's so caught up in his own life and in his own things that are going wrong with his business or with his household or with whatever it is, that his heart is not free to turn to God. And then afterwards, for the entire day, all of his thoughts are only concerned with his own good and physical matters. And about the good of the other, of another person, or the good of his own soul, he does not think at all. So this is the distinction. This is what you're supposed to think about at Kriya Shema Lamita. You're supposed to think about...
Who is this author? When did the previous Rebbe write this?
1931.
Okay.
Why do you ask?
Because of the environment that he wrote these words.
What environment?
The sociological environment of the Jews that versus the environment of the allotted Rebbe. We always picture that the Chassidim that he's writing for were basically pious people.
Mm-hmm.
Here the previous Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, has basically told us that.
That's an interesting observation. I don't know if I would say that's true across the board, but that's an interesting observation. Fair enough. That's an interesting idea to keep in mind.
I don't think it's like general issues. It's not
I agree with Eyal too. I agree with both of you. I think it's interesting. I think Eyal has a point that these are general issues. Certainly the Alter Rebbe also says Avodah Maimarim. The Alter Rebbe also talks about the need for these things, just maybe not in the we just may not have learned from the Alter Rebbe necessarily the Maimarim that are like this. Nevertheless, I don't know if that's something which could be said conclusively, but on the other hand, an interesting observation. Okay, so that is what you're supposed to think about at the Kriya Shema that you say before you go to sleep. This is the Cheshbon Tzedek, the righteous reckoning. I think about how my day was versus how my day should have been. Ubelayla kasher is a cheshbon. And at night, when a person makes a reckoning of everything that happens in the entire day, he sees with his own eyes that everything that he thought was necessary to do in worldly matters and in toiling for buying and selling, the entire thing was an entire mistake. If a person thinks honestly about what he gains from what he does during the day, and all of the mental space and emotional space that took up in his day, he will realize that it actually accomplished nothing. All of the space that it took up in his life that day was actually to no end. And continues the Friedrich Rebbe, "V'asher kol tachbuleisav haya shalei l'toivasei klal," and how all of his scheming was not for his own benefit at all. It benefited him nothing to be scheming. Now, I want to make just a clear distinction here for a moment. Okay, very important distinction. Very important distinction. The previous Rebbe is not saying that a person doesn't need to work, or that it is not the person's work which earns them money. That is not what the Friedrich Rebbe is saying. What the Friedrich Rebbe is saying is that the toil, that's the key word, Asek and Tachbuleisav. Asek means toil, Tachbuleisav means his schemes, right? This is like the famous story of the Rebbe Rashab, that a Chassid who owned a factory that made galoshes came to the Rebbe Rashab, and he was speaking to him the whole time in Yechidus about the difficulties he's having with his business. And the Rebbe Rashab told him the famous line that I've met people who put their feet in the galoshes before, but I've never met someone who puts their head in the galoshes. Right? This is the point, the same point the Friedrich Rebbe is making here. In other words, it's not that you don't have to go to a job, you have to go and work. Why? Because God wants that his blessing should come through a natural vessel in this world. Right? You have to make natural vessels for God's blessings. It's not just a systems obligation. It's not just that it works, it's actually the command of God. You are commanded to make a vessel for his blessings. Right? Yivarechecha, as the verse famously says, Yivarechecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol asher taseh. God will bless you where? In everything that you do. The blessings come through what you do. Right? You have to do. The Talmud says that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was of the opinion that a Jew just has to learn Torah, he doesn't have to work. Right? And the Talmud records many people tried to live the way Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, and it didn't work for them. In other words, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai could do that. He was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. For most of us, that does not work. That is not feasible. We won't survive that way. We have to work. What are we not to do? We are not to put into our work any more effort, intelligence, or emotion than the work absolutely requires to be a natural vessel for the blessing of Hashem. That's what the Friedrich Rebbe is saying. In other words, it is not doing the work that is the problem. It is believing that the blessing comes from the work and not from God through the work. That is essentially the difference. If you believe the blessing comes from God through the work, then how do you do the work? In the way that is appropriate for a vessel, not for the cause of the blessing. Right?
It's very vague. I mean, how can you define something like that? It's like, there's an expression, you're going to work or you're going to work.
Right.
So, you say, okay, I'm going to work, I'm going to sit on my table, legs on, high, and everything is going to be taken care of by me. That's not going to work. I mean, you need to actually put yourself into...
It's not what he's saying.
Doesn't leave room
But there's no definition.
To some extent.
The definition, as I interpret it, is you can
create the vessel.
you can, if you work without keeping in mind that Hashem have created the vessel for you to operate within which you operate, and that you should be working for the benefit of being able to take those blessings for the fulfilling Hashem's mitzvot, and you do it in a way that is honest and in Torah-like, then the work is okay. But if all you do is you go to work and you work and you work and you work, and at the end of the day, all right, now I can turn my attention to God.
The Friedrich Rebbe is not just saying that, although I think that's correct what you said. I think that the Friedrich Rebbe is saying that the fundamental belief and how much you believe it changes the way you approach work. If you believe that the blessing really comes from God, right, work becomes secondary, it becomes batal, right? The same way, by the way, I just want to make this connection again, since we're all so scholarly and so learned, the exact same way we said in Shara Yichud Va'emunah, that the cup is nothing but godliness, right? What does that mean? It doesn't mean the cup's not here exactly as we see it. The cup is here as we see it. What is the reality of that cup? Godliness.
True.
Nothing but godliness.
But imagine the one who makes a cup, there's a hole in it. Doesn't make a difference. I created a cup. Even though it has a hole in it, it's still a cup.
It's not fair. I agree. That is the greatest challenge. That's the entire
you need
question.
to put everything that you can in order to make the cup the best you can.
No, I disagree. Not everything that you can to make it the best you can. Absolutely not.
So just make it a cup, okay.
There are some, the whole question is the purpose, right? I think the metaphor is good because I think it gets to the core of what the Chassidic Rebbes is saying. In other words, Chassidic Rebbes is saying like this: why do you want water in a cup?
To elevate, yeah, okay.
Let's say it's a Kiddush cup, right? For making Kiddush on Friday night. Mitzvah. It's a mitzvah,
okay.
Right? Oh, by mitzvah, there's hidur mitzvah actually, so I take it back. It actually doesn't work. It's a different.
I will use that example just to.
The point is
you can take the cup as is, but you can put some decoration on the cup. You make
yes,
nicer.
but that's hidur mitzvah. That's actually the opposite. That's the opposite idea.
That's for every work.
No, it's not. It's absolutely
not. I'll tell you why.
Hidur mitzvah. Mitzvah is a mitzvah. Mitzvah is chodesh.
You do the work the best you can. You gain more money. You put more tzedakah.
The classic worker's excuse, right? It can be used to erase anything. It's magic tzedakah. Yes. It can do anything, right? I can behave in my work however I want, and then at the end, the tzedakah, right? That's what the Jewish mafia boss says. That's what why not? Why not? So the Chassidic Rebbes. So there's 2 points. There's behaving according to halacha, which everyone has to do. Even the Jewish mafia boss knows that what he's doing is wrong because his money is blood money. It comes through an avera, right? So that's obvious.
Okay, so that's the way.
That's obvious.
Okay.
The Chassidic Rebbes is saying something less obvious. He's saying, even if you work according to Jewish law, even if you follow the law, nevertheless, your work should be only a vessel for godliness. It shouldn't be an end unto itself.
I agree.
In other words, the work only has to be as good as it has to be a vessel for godliness.
But what does it mean vessel? It could be like a small vessel or wood.
How much of a vessel does it need to be?
But there's a definition.
I agree. I'm not sure there's one definition for everyone, perhaps a different definition for everyone. Everyone has to find their own place, which is the right place, but a person has to be honest with themselves. In other words, are you here and doing all of this work for your own self-benefit, or are you doing it for God? And the truth is that if a person is honest with themselves and they realize that if they give tzedakah and they give, I don't know, whatever it is, 10% to tzedakah, 20% to tzedakah, what are they doing with the rest of that money?
But it's going for even the challah you bake. You buy a challah.
Yeah.
It tastes like.
That's a mitzvah. That's a mitzvah.
No. The baker makes a challah. He can make the challah as like water and dough, and it tastes like water and dough. Another one put like a sesame on top.
Why?
Because it tastes better. And
what does tasting better do? The Chassidic Rebbes says the person should be spending his whole day thinking about God. Instead, he's thinking about his own needs. That his bread should taste good. That's exactly what the Chassidic Rebbes is saying. You're saying, what about for Shabbos? And the answer is, Shabbos is a mitzvah. That's for God, not for you. It should be anyway. Right? That's exactly what the Chassidic Rebbes is saying. Why does a person need nice bread? On the contrary, the Chassidic Rebbes would say, perhaps a person should try eating not nice bread. Maybe that would be good. Focus less on the physical. Why? As long as the bread is giving you energy to serve God, why is the niceness of the bread so important to you?
So make only matzot, and that's it. No need for bread.
I'm not arguing with you. Maybe that's correct.
But
the Chassidic Rebbes is not saying that explicitly. The Chassidic Rebbes is not saying. The Chassidic Rebbes is not saying where the line is. He's saying that a person should know there is a line, and he should be constantly thinking about where his line is. That's the point. The Chassidic Rebbes is not saying everyone has to eat only matzah. The Chassidic Rebbes is saying that you should be aware when you're eating the very fancy bread, for example, right? How much of this is for God and what God needs from me, and how much of it is for my own pleasure, my own benefit. It's very simple. And eventually, I'm not so sure, by the way, having thought about my marim like this at this point for a number of years, I'm not sure there is one line in one place. I think in this matter, where the line is depends on every person's different, I think. I think where exactly the line is depends, right? Because there's a lot of factors involved, right? There's a lot of factors involved. Some people do need a lot of money, and their money is of benefit to God. The bottom line is you have to be honest. You have to be honest, and if you can't be honest with yourself, that's what a mashpia is for. That's what a mentor is meant to be for. They can help you be honest, right? And figure out where this line is meant to be. And the mashpia shouldn't be someone that benefits from your nice bread. It should be someone objective, right? You should find someone that can tell you the truth. That's the most valuable thing. That's what the Chassidic Rebbes is saying. That's a righteous, a cheshbon tzedek. A person should judge their affairs with honesty. What is for God? My whole day should be devoted toward God. When I go to work, that work should be only for purposes that God has prescribed it. If there's anything else going on, I need to at least be aware of it and at least know what it is.
Some people, by way of example, I've known people.
Of course it's very hard. I told you you'd be yearning for the philosophical mimer at this point.
Not to make money, but because to them the work is an enjoyable experience.
I agree.
It's a game.
And also, you don't want your brain surgeon, while he's operating on your brain, thinking, is this for God, is this not for God? People have to be fully invested in what they're doing.
But my concern,
the purpose of what you're doing is...
If you actually think of the famous
a
story...
way to escape, instead of doing the best they can and to feel like, I'm doing that either because I like it or because, I need to do the best I can to serve other people, say, it's too hard. Why should I put so much effort? Let's do the minimum and let's go.
Sometimes being very bad at this worldly things helps a person be very good at godly things. Sometimes
Absolutely.
not, but
Yeah.
sometimes it does.
Of course it will.
Yeah.
Because instead of putting like 10 hours for work, you put 1 hour and then the rest.
I think I should show you.
We've learned from Rabbi Silver.
We'll show you the.
Chassidus that when you go
We'll
to
show
work,
you. We'll show you the Maimarim of the Chassidic Rebbe where it says a person should decrease the hours they work and increase the hours they daven and learn Torah.
I think the Rebbe, I think it was because
I told you everyone would be begging for the philosophical Maimarim again by halfway through this paragraph.
When the Rebbe says,
I told you this would happen.
You give 100% to the work.
Right. But 100%.
In other words, you cannot cheat the employer. Isn't that correct?
Cheating the employer would be
100% of
terrible.
1 minute,
You
100%
shouldn't
of
cheat
1
the
hour.
employer, but maybe you should find an employer that gives you a less demanding job. Maybe. I'm not saying.
But the answer is actually giving them Torah because it says, te'aseh melechtecha. It's like you don't even need to do the work. The work is going to be done for you. And the seventh day, you go and relax. So, the words are in there. The question is how to interpret them. Because, if you want to be a lazy guy, say, well, it's going to be done for me. I'm going to sleep. And it's going to be done for me. Now say,
then you're going to starve.
It depends what your responsibilities are. It depends what your responsibilities are, how much your job lets you cover those responsibilities, like I said. But the point is, you can't just sit back and say that automatically, because this seems to be for my own self-benefit, I enjoy it and it makes me money, either or. And I enjoy it can be at very deep levels. I enjoy it spiritually. It adds to my life spiritually, which most good jobs do, by the way, right? Even that, a person has to be honest. Is this for my own benefit or is this for God? All the Chassidic Rebbe is asking for is a little bit of self-honesty. A person should sit down and think about this every day. Was my work all devoted to God? Did I wake up from bed looking to serve God in the morning? Or did I wake up from bed and look to do my own thing? And I can't pretend that these two things are the same thing because they're not. My own thing is not God's thing. Right? Unless I'm explicitly making sure every day that it is God's thing.
And it's asking you to do it for yourself, not to discuss it with everybody.
That is correct.
Yeah,
At the Chassidus class.
Correct.
But it's very hard because sometimes you look
This is very hard, by the
you
way.
look for innovation.
This
you
is very
all
hard.
the time that you have, then you get nothing. So what does it mean?
I think no one would disagree that you should do everything to the best of your ability. Everything you do. Your question is your motivation. I think that's what Tzvi's saying.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Yes.
Perhaps. The question is should you be involved in the things that you're doing to the best of your ability, right? Sometimes. Right? Sometimes.
Yeah. The question is, should you be involved? But if you're going to do something,
Yeah.
you should.
If you're going to do something. But the thing is that you can't choose 20 years ago, I'm going to do something. Okay, now I'm going to do it for 60 years. Right? When do you do this? Every day. Every day, what am I involved in? What am I involved in? What did I choose to enter my energies into? And the Chassidic Rebbe is saying, with utmost confidence, that if a person sits at the end of the day and thinks about what they put their energy into, they will realize that many of the things they put their energy into in work did not benefit them at all. It not only is it not for God, it was nothing. It didn't benefit them. His point is, why doesn't it benefit you? Because God is the one that gives you your parnasa, not your work. Right? So if you take a little bit from what you're doing for the work that's not benefiting you anything, and put that energy and that time into serving God, what will you have lost? Nothing. What will you have gained? The service of God. That's the Chassidic Rebbe's whole point, right? I'm going to read just a little more. We're three minutes left. I want to read just a little more. Continues the Chassidic Rebbe. We are, it's hard to say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines from the bottom of the page. Line starts, L'toivase. A person will realize that he does not benefit from all of these schemes anything. Sometimes more, on the contrary, he loses. He loses from all of this scheming that he did, right? Not only did he not gain money, sometimes your schemes get you into trouble and you lose money. And if he had davened with a minyan, morning, evening, and night, and he had established times for learning Torah, and he had not bothered and confused himself with many thoughts and many extra troubles, shel mabakach, and schemes, empty schemes that never came to anything. Aside from this, that he would not have wasted his energies, he wouldn't have wasted his health, is literally how the Chassidic Rebbe says it in Yiddish. Furthermore, he would have been able to serve God, which is the purpose and the main part of the descent in the soul in the body. As the verse says, this verse is brought, I don't know, probably a dozen times just in that sefer. Just in that sefer, this verse is brought a dozen times, and what he learns from it is always the same thing. I'm going to tell it for you quickly. We're almost done. As is written, I have created the earth, and man upon it I have created. The important word here is barasi, which means I have created. The masha anechi misha anechi. This that I am I. Anechi mi, as our Rastafarian friends would say. Anechi misha anechi, right? The I of eyes. The ultimate subjectivity, the ultimate God beyond all definition. This, that asisi aretz, I have made the earth, hu bishvil ha'adam, is for who? Is for man. Ubrias ha'adam hu bishvil barasi, and the creation of man is for barasi, the word I have created. What is the word barasi? Sheyakayem taryag mitzvahs. Barasi is gematria, taryag. 613 is the word's numeric value. Why have I created the earth? For man. And what have I created man for? For the 613 mitzvahs. That's what the Chassidic Rebbe learns from this pasuk. As the sages say, God made a condition with the creation. If the Jews accept the Torah, it's good. This is the famous Midrash. If they do not accept the Torah, I will return it to chaos and the void. Right? In other words, the Chassidic Rebbe is saying reality check. You sit on your bed every night, you say Shema. What's the reality check? Why am I here on this earth? Right? I literally do not need to have been born if I'm spending my day working so I can eat nice bread. The whole purpose of my life is to serve God. Now, sometimes serving God involves working so I can eat nice bread. No one's denying that. But why am I here on this earth? Serving God, 613 mitzvahs. If it was not for the mitzvahs, I literally would not be here. God gives me life, He gives me breath in the morning, so that this day I can do something for Him, which is the 613 mitzvahs, the worship of God, the bringing of the one into the place of multiplicity, as we said. Echad, the one into the world. And if we are not doing that, why did God give us life this past day? And why should He give us life in the morning. That is called a righteous reckoning. This is not called, by the way, be depressed and sad time. All it is called is righteous cheshbon tzedek, a righteous reckoning. In other words, look at things straight for a minute. Don't look at them all crooked. Don't look at them all backwards and confused. Look at things simple and direct. How was your day? How should your day be? What is it meant to all be for? It's meant to be for God. We will continue this warm and delicious mimer, God willing, next week.
Thank you very much.